Just a few weeks ago, this nearly complete bike was nothing but a sad collection of mismatched parts. We've had our share of misery.
We're not unable to bleed the brake.
And surprising victories.
Easy as that.
And now it's time for yours truly, the clearly world-class bike mechanic, to attempt to assemble the final parts of this beauty. Spoiler alert, things didn't exactly go smoothly. But hey, who wouldn't go to the ends of the earth, or at least as far as AliExpress, to build their dream bike? For those of you who haven't seen the previous 2 episodes, we have installed the fork steerer, handlebars, shifters, both derailleurs, seat post, and fully routed the cables. So let the games continue. So first on the list of tasks is to get the brake pads back into the calipers. So I removed the bleed block from the front brake caliper and placed the L2 RX brake pads into the front caliper. Then onto the rear pads, and I repeat the same process. Let's hope that these pads can actually stop me and I don't run into issues like other YouTubers have. I want to get the brakes and the gears sorted, and to do this I need to set up the wheels so that the bike can stand on her own 2 feet.
This is emotionally magnificent.
I'm going to be using these Gravel King Panaracer semi-slick 32mm tyres for this Rinasclta all-road build. This frame has huge tyre clearance, and these tyres will give me the all-road performance that I'm after. This wheel set, the R470DB from DT Swiss, is second-hand. It came with the Icetech rotors, GP5000 tyres, and an 11-speed Shimano 105 cassette. All of that cost me a whopping £81. Can you believe it? The bargain of the century. I mean, the rotors alone are £40 each, and so are the tyres. Unfortunately though, this is a 12-speed group set, so I'm going to remove the 105 cassette and I'm going to be installing this L2 12-speed cassette that I bought from AliExpress. This 12-speed cassette slid onto the Shimano 11-speed free hub without issue. I added the final cogs, and the moment of truth, it fits. Time to whip out the torque wrench that's so massive it could double as a medieval weapon. With the wrench set to a modest 40 Newton meters, I tighten the cassette and check for any signs of Shakira level hip movement. I was relieved to find that the cassette was as secure as 4 knots. No hips don't lie here, just a lonely man in his shed, living the dream one component at a time. Now for the tyres, my glue to the road. I've seen many clips online where people change tyres by hand at the side of the road, but in my experience, it's always far from that. So I'm either doing something wrong or others are giving me false hope. I checked the tyres for a directional arrow, but as the thread is symmetrical, I'm pretty sure they can go on either way. I couldn't find the arrow, so I either need glasses or I'm right. I then get the tyre half on the wheel, which was tighter than one would hope. Not a good sign. Then I got these inner tubes out. Lo and behold, these sneaky little tubes were only fit for a max tyre width of 25mm. Cue the facepalm moment. Like the desperate scavenger I am, I rummaged through my parts drawer. I managed to dig up a single lonely inner tube that was a perfect fit. For the other tube, well, let's just say that my other gravel bike is now 1 inner tube short. I mean, what's more logical than cannibalising one bike to create another? Clearly I've got this whole bike building thing down to a science.
You find something nice and you ruin it.
In went the inner tube that I raided from the gravel bike. It was a chunky one, but I squeezed it in, starting from the valve. I then began working the tyre onto the wheel, hoping for the best. Some manoeuvring, manipulating, position changes later, I slipped the last bit over the rim with a tyre lever. I pumped the tyre up to 55 psi to get it seated and then let some air out. These tyres have a max pressure of 60 psi. It was looking good, and I must admit the tan sidewall stands out. Now whilst admiring the visuals, I then completed the exact same on the other wheel. This was actually easier, believe it or not. I managed to get the tyre on by hand. I did stretch this tyre out first though, so maybe that helped. Next up is a saddle, which my gluteus maximus will soon become connected with. This EC90 saddle was another AliExpress special, costing a whopping £18 including delivery. The seat mechanism was actually easy to work with. All I had to do was loosen the clamping bolt, which freed these 2 clamps meant to cradle the seat rails like a tender embrace. So I slid the seat into place. Of course, in a true display of my mechanical prowess, I managed to drop the Allen key, just like everyone does, right? With my Allen key retrieved, I loosely tightened the clamp bolt, securing the saddle. I then flipped her upside down like a gymnast dismount so I could install the wheels. I greased the thread on the through axle for the front wheel, and I went to slide her in, only to realise the caliper was blocking the wheel. I have the wrong adapter installed. You can see here, the wheel just won't get into the dropouts. Basically, there's not enough space. Off came the old adapter, and this one was in the pack of bits, so I'm assuming it is correct. I tried to bolt it to the frame only to realise that the bolts were too long for the frame and there was no way that I could actually get it tight. As you can see with this bolt fully tightened, there is more movement than Shakira on a good day. There were no other small bolts in the box. Another hurdle. Just when I was about to cut the bolts down, I remembered that I had a box of bolts from my Duintech F1 brakes. There were some small bolts in the pack. On went the new adapter and the bolts were tightened to spec. The caliper went back on and the wheel slid into the frame nicely. Luckily, the rear wheel was plain sailing and just slid right into place without issue. If you have watched the previous episodes in this build series, you will know that these brake levers have caused what some may call a headache. When I tried the rear wheel, there was some bite, but the front wheel, nothing. You can see the wheel spin with the brake applied fully. I decided to give it another bleed to be double sure before I adjust the famous lever screw. On went the bleed block, out came the screw in the shifter, in went the bleed cup with some oil. I set up the syringe and we are good to go. I angled the bike so the shifter was high and I pushed the oil in. Some bubbles did come out, so all good there. I inserted the screw into the caliper and then I tried the old vacuum technique that I learned from Johnny. A few more bubbles emerged, bidding us farewell as they floated away like tiny whimsical balloons. With everything back in its rightful place, the lever was feeling perkier as if it had just downed a shot of espresso. Sure, it managed to grip the wheel when pressed, but I wasn't exactly bursting with confidence. We'll revisit the thrilling saga of the brakes later, so stay tuned. The chain, a simple task, and I have this SRAM Force 12-speed chain with flat top technology. I must admit, I love the look of these chains. They are different, and I like different.
And it's beautiful.
To install the chain, I'm using the big ring to big ring technique to work out the correct size. Then I add the split link to the chain. This adds extra length. I then found the closest link that the chain could be attached to. Remember, the split link is an outer link, so you need to find the closest inner link. Then from the rivet on the closest inner link, I count down 2 chain rivets, and that is where the chain will be split. I checked and double checked this because it's easy for the chain to slip off the biggest ring, especially at the rear. So measure twice, cut once. My chain splitter tool couldn't accommodate the flat top. Odd. A quick rummage and this other one worked like a charm and the chain was split. The extra links were added to the memory shelf to look back on in many years to come. I then routed the chain through the derailleur and around the chain rings and used my trusty metal hook to keep the chain together so that the split link can be installed. I then realised I routed the chain incorrectly, as you can see here. So off came the split link, I routed the chain correctly, and this time we are good to go. Now onto the gear adjustment, and I'm starting with the front derailleur. I need to adjust its position so it's in line with the chain rings and a few millimeters above the largest chain ring. To do that, I loosen the clamping bolt, adjust the height and angle, and then tighten the clamping bolt back up. At this point, I'm working out the easiest way to get the derailleur set up because we have this adjustment bolt which gives us some extra flexibility. I also realized at this point I should have done the high and low limit screws with the chain off for the front and rear derailleurs. If you don't know, then the high and low limit screws dictate how far the derailleur can move in each direction. On the front derailleur, this stops the chain going inside the small chain ring and outside of the large chain ring. It's the same at the back. It stops the chain going past the large chain ring into the spokes and past the small chain ring between the cassette and the frame. To adjust this, I loosen the clamping bolt and then push the derailleur by hand and align with the trusty eyeballs. I'm also not 100% sure on the routing of this inner cable, but I folded it back on itself so that the cable wasn't facing outwards towards the crank arm. I gave it a try and it was fine going down into a smaller ring, but when I went into the bigger ring, the chain slipped off towards the crank arm. A mistake has been made. The limit screw was incorrect, so that got another adjustment. I tried again and all was good. As expected, the rear derailleur has a natural affinity for those smaller cogs. That's the way it naturally springs. So I set the limit screw there first. It was damn near spot on, only a minor tickle of the screw. I pushed the derailleur whilst pedaling all the way to the large cog and checked the limit screw once more. A minor adjustment was needed to get the chain to reach the largest cog. To remove the slack from the rear gear cable, I used this little trick. Push the chain into the third or fourth smallest cog and undo the barrel adjuster a little to give yourself some wriggle room. Make sure that the rear derailleur is in the highest gear, the smallest cog at the shifter. Then pull the cable tight with pliers and tighten the cable clamping bolt. When you pedal, the derailleur will naturally pull the cable tighter and you won't have any slack in your cable. As you can see here, the cable dropped into the second smallest cog. I can screw the barrel adjuster in to get it to the smallest cog. I proceed to test the gears, making delicate adjustments with the barrel adjuster like a bike whisperer. I used to be a bit of a perfectionist, striving for immaculate gear performance on the bike stand. But then I had a revelation. When you are out there clad in your finest form-fitting spandex, channeling your inner Hulk through the drive chain, the shifting always has a mind of its own. Not to mention the gear cables eventually settling in and suddenly everything is out of whack again. So now I embrace the art of close enough, knowing full well my bike and I will share many delightful moments of on-the-fly adjustments as we conquer the great outdoors. I snip the cables to length and install the little end caps to keep everything neat and tidy. The drive chain is looking good, ready to receive some abuse. Now I got these pedals for £23 on eBay because I refused to pay over £40 for pedals.
Word gets out, you're a cheapskate.
I like to save pennies where I can. Plus, I actually need 3 sets of these pedals. More bike builds coming up. Hands up, I understand it's a first world problem. Pedals have a left and right, so before you go gun-ho, make sure you've got the right one for the right side. Next, lather some grease on those threads like it's sunscreen on a scorching summer's day. Grab your trusty Allen key or pedal spanner and start screwing them into the frame. But beware, the left pedal is a sneaky character with a reverse thread, meaning it tightens counterclockwise. Be gentle, my friends, or you might just end up with a sad pair of ruined cranks. A quick spirit level on the seat so I'm not sitting on a slope, and she is complete. Minus the bar tape for reasons you'll see later. Now click here for more bike building banter, which shows you the previous steps to getting this bike built. Lots to be seen and learned. Folks, what do you think of the Rinasclta all-road bike?
It looks really good.